Do we need an arm day to have big arms? Hey, everybody. I thought I would chat with you guys and gals a little bit about this today. And again, this is a topic that a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions on. They're going to have views on if body part splits are even worth doing, or if you should just do full body or upper lower. And I'm going to give a little bit of my just personal anecdote here as someone who's been making gains in their arms lately. After not having the best arm development after years of powerlifting. And here's the thing that I'm going to say, and I'm going to discuss a little bit of the science with this, but I've been doing more split routines to where either I have weeks where I do pressing and then my triceps on pressing day to where my triceps got used for all the early exercises, or I do back in bicep days where I'm doing pull-ups and chin-ups and stuff and then doing curls afterwards without other exercises in between, or I have weeks where I do actual arm days. And I've actually seen my arms improve. They're still probably my weakest body part overall compared to things like my back, my calves, all that stuff, right? But they have grown. They've grown. And, here's the point we're going to make with some of this as far as actually needing an arm day. People will say, well, there are people who do have great arms who do almost no curls or extensions just from pressing and pulling. Yeah, and they have great genetics, and they're usually at a higher body weight. They've bulked pretty big. Good genetics for arms with many, many years of training. Or they started with just great arms genetically, right? You've seen those guys. They look like they lift. Right? They already started with great like bicep insertions and all that stuff. They had great shaped arms and everything before they even started lifting. And then of course, once they started lifting, it accentuated that. Or you'll see like gymnasts and other stuff, these calisthenics guys who do spend hours, hundreds of hours, thousands of hours doing all these body weight movements, who still have pretty good arms. But here's the point. We can argue about efficiency. And I'm going to discuss in a minute what I mean by both efficiency and then as far as kind of what data shows as far as muscle fiber recruitment. And I'm going to say that if you do not have good arm genetics, you're like me, you don't have the best arm genetics, or you spend a lot of time doing, mostly just big compounds on top of that because of strength training, you very well might need an arm day. Okay, it's not a bad idea. Now, let's just put that out there. Do you need it? Is it essential? No. Is it probably a good idea at that point if you want bigger arms? And I'm going to say yes, probably a pretty good idea. Okay. Not necessary, but it will be helpful. It'll be useful. All right. So one of the things I want to discuss straight up, though, when it comes to the whole calisthenics argument or the gymnasts, people are like, well, these Olympic gymnasts have good arms. And it's like, okay, but do you want that to be your career? In other words, yeah, they're getting a ton of workload, but what does their lifestyle have to look like to accommodate doing gymnastics all the time? They may not have even other jobs. They're probably genetically gifted, but a lot of them are on the rings 20 plus hours a week. Do you really want to be on the gymnastics rings for 20 hours every week? Just so that you can not have an arm day? Or do you want to go to the gym for an hour and train your arms for an hour once a week? I mean, if we're going to talk about efficiency, it just seems like to me coming in and having a day where you do 10, 12, 14 sets of extensions and curls each, and be done in an hour, 10 minutes, whatever, hour and a half, whatever it happens to take you. Shouldn't take an hour and a half, right? Would you rather spend 20 hours a week on the gymnastics rings, 1 hour versus 20? I think for most people, that's an easy choice. You could have all that other time to go do other stuff. Okay? It's kind of like we come over to that point, specificity of training. Do you want a training benefit to be a side effect, or do you want it to be the thing you train for? If you train for something specifically, you're probably going to get there more quickly and with less time investment versus if it's just a fringe benefit to another primary goal. And that's the problem with that. Keeping in mind, again, if they're a high-level gymnast, they probably have really good genetics, okay, for what they're doing. So that may give them their great athlete genes, maybe even certain muscle fiber distributions. Okay, they may not be the average Joe. Okay, so, but again, efficiency, it doesn't make a lot of sense from an efficiency perspective. So then the other thing to think about is going to be fatigue and muscle fiber recruitment. This is the problem we run into with a lot of the full body training. How many people out there who do full body training end up with a better lower body than upper body? A lot. Okay? How many guys do that? And man, they get to a 405 squat and a 500 deadlift, but struggle to bench 225, struggle to do 10 chin-ups. How common is that? Pretty dang common. So why is that? Because we usually have to do the big movements first. Like if we don't have the energy left. Like no one wants to do a bunch of squats after doing the other stuff. Well, what happens? We get fatigue, and what people have to think about is localized fatigue versus systemic fatigue. The more work you do, the more your nervous system cuts out. Okay? Your nervous system, peripheral nervous system and everything does get fatigued from training. The deeper you get into a workout, the less of the motor units you're able to turn on. So what does that mean? That means that whatever you train to last, you may not be reaching as many of the highest threshold muscle fibers. In other words, even though you're getting a training response, so I don't want people to think, well, if you do curls at the end after doing a bunch of squats and benching, it won't make your biceps grow. Because it will, but it is going to be a reduced performance, and you may not get as many muscle fibers in them. See where we're going? Whereas if you do every exercise that you do uses that muscle, you are going to get to those deeper fibers easier, because even if the fatigue accumulates, those muscles worked all the way through. And at least you're getting the localized fatigue. Otherwise, we get more of the localized fatigue in whatever we train first. So at least if you do pull-ups, you're getting biceps before the curls, but the benching isn't hitting it, the squats aren't hitting it, and vice versa. Okay, you see where we're going even with a split where you're like, well, I do benching and pull-ups and everything, but the other exercises are still creating fatigue that are interfering with the later work. If you really and truly want to maximize growth in a muscle, that muscle should be trained all the way through. So at the very least, like let's say triceps are a priority for you. You probably need to, if you're going to do anything beyond triceps in that day, you probably need it to be all pressing so that at least the triceps are getting localized fatigue to go with the systemic all the way through. You're going to get more muscle fibers. Now, if we come in and we have individual days, any muscle group that is a weak link for you should possibly have its own day every week. Because again, we don't need the higher frequency if the training volumes are reasonably high on that one day. Right? That's what research also shows. Frequency doesn't matter if volume is fairly equal. So any muscle that is really a big deal, like if your delts are a weak link, you should probably have a shoulder day. If your biceps are a weak link, you should probably have an arm day. Mainly because you're making sure that you're getting a training session every week to where that muscle is getting complete stimulus, because you're not fatiguing your whole system before getting to the deeper sets to it. Right? So that again, in that case, if every work set done that day, or the majority of them, is hitting that muscle, or at least starting out with it too, you know that you're getting all the available muscle fibers in it more easily. Versus leaving a lot of them on the table because you were kind of fatigued already by the time you got to it, and your nervous system just simply isn't going to allow the muscle to do as much work as possible. Okay, so yes, if you have any muscle that's lagging, it's a good idea to give it its own day. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.